Welcome back, y'all. We've got another session of A Moment with Medora as we go through her book, Reclaiming Your Community. And I am so grateful for all y'all who have started to read and send me messages. What's up, what's up? I really appreciate y'all. I even got a message that somebody was listening to it as an audiobook. Shout out to y'all for following along. Today we will be reading, we will be discussing chapters 10 through 12. If you've missed any of the other chapters, don't worry, you'll be able to follow along and chat. It's all a discussion anyhow. But you can also go to the link in my bio and you will be able to click through to the YouTube. And I've got some of the videos up there and I will put the rest as soon as I can. I'm just checking to see who I've got in here with me. Hey y'all. Okay, so we're gonna get Majara up shortly. But just a recap of where we have been. We have talked about quite a few different topics and theories of, learning to see the beauty in ourselves and the power that we can accomplish through the actions of what we see described here in this book. Hey, Majara, I see ya. Hi. Ooh, first world problems. Hopefully that worked. Yes,
Oh,
I got you. Okay. Hello. Hi.
it takes
Welcome back.
me a minute. How are
I'm
you?
doing well. How are you?
I'm okay. A little up. Say what?
Well, hopefully we can bring you a little bit of joy and good vibes.
Yes.
Um, I I've reading through these chapters. You have some beautiful messages in here, so maybe today we remind you of those.
That's
Because
lovely.
not to date anything, but this really puts into perspective. In these chapters we learn basically the leading up to Bronxlandia, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, I know what's happening. I
Yeah.
love that.
I don't think we
um,
understood it back then. We kind of did, but not exactly. But yeah, I reread that thing and looked at the photo and was just like, wow. Wow. And we're still moving. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead. Ask away.
yeah. No, the unexpected beginnings of things is really where I see a lot of these chapters. You talk about working with the Bronx River Working Group and how falling into working alongside the Bronx River, there's uh, let me say, there's a place in here where you say that you didn't even see the river. Like you didn't think of it as a thing. You see it on the map and you didn't consider it to be this natural resource that could be one day so beautifully used and utilized. And you sort of fell into that, literally dragged into it by your dog Xena,
Oh,
right? The story everybody loves. But you being able to see the beauty of things um, before others can, and aside from others being able to. So that I think is what chapter 10, garbage in a golden ball, is. And then at the end of, well, you talk about going through the waste management. Actually, I just learned a lot about the Bronx through historically. I didn't realize, the pollution issue. And I like to be whoever and tell people don't litter, whatever. But it is amazing how you said that. Most people don't see how waste is being disposed in all of these pollution of our natural resources, and how they're dumped into neighborhoods that are like ours, and how that destroys both the environment and the people. You talk about the asthma rates, and going out there and pulling the pollution in the air with your mom. So that to me was incredibly beautiful and an unexpected beginning. And it kind of, when I think about what you've done, also, you talk about getting into Broxlandia, but all of the work that you've done aside from that and outside of that is kind of what I'd love to talk about today,
Yeah.
because you've worked on the waste management, making sure that these, like, rallying against them. You've turned abandoned dumps into parks so that they can be used. But you're wrapped up in all of these things. So let's talk a little bit about, where does your heart really lie? I guess you're doing so much of this and people see you as one thing or another. Um, and I know we have a lots to go to where we get to you today,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to share with us how that feels, of just falling into these different streams and doing so much.
Yeah. I mean, it really, I mean, everything I do in part, it was just the response to our communities being considered these sacrifice zones. Like, you can dump the kind of things that, wealthier and wider communities would never have. It's just understood. Like, you just don't even put those things there. Politically, we were so vulnerable. And, and thanks to like just the legacy of white supremacy, it's like our communities were the kind of places there was just sort of like, are they really going to notice the crap that's there or not? And I think on some level we kind of felt the same way. It's just like that's the whole point of people feeling like you get away from these communities, and that's was, I think, ultimately sort of like the undergirding of so much of what like just the history that I think we bring, to our communities ourselves. But yeah, so doing things like when I found out about this waste facility being, targeted for our waterfront, that both the city and state governments were just like, oh yeah, that's the place to put it, Hunts Point, literally like several blocks away from where I'm sitting right now. And it just seemed like, having the kind of like understanding that these things are happening because we happen to be a poor community of color and thus politically vulnerable, and they keep happening. And and even though, yeah, we should absolutely be like fighting against the kind of things that we definitely know are hurtful and hateful toward us, but we can also, I just feel the thing that really moved me was like, but what are we fighting for? Like, what kind of community is actually the thing that's going to give us hope and dreams and a future that makes us feel good about being where we are? And I thought that was a strategy. Like, I really did. Like, I don't really have any background in community, especially at the time, community organizing or planning or anything like that. But it just seemed like it made sense. Like, if everybody's telling you your community sucks, and you're like, it may suck sometimes, but it's because we're not being treated the way that we know we need to be treated. And maybe we should put that into place. It just seemed to me like this is the kind of thing that's going to get somebody's attention. And I was 100% right. So that's why it's like doing things like, we're going to transform this dump into a park. And so, yes, I'm very grateful for my puppy Xena for for helping make that, because there's no
Yeah.
way I would have gone into this, because it was a dump. I mean, I saw this dump. I even did see the river, but it was like, because you had to go from Hunts Point and you went on the Bruckner drawbridge, right, to get into this park that was at that time like totally undeveloped, Soundview Park, when I was running there with my dog. And so I would see this river under the bridge, but it was just like there was nothing appealing about it that made you go, oh, that's like something cool. I mean, it was a water body, not something you ever wanted to spend time in. And it just separated these two bodies of land. That's all it was. But the fact that it just never occurred to me that you would set up something that allowed you to consider that place a valuable part of your community. And so again, thank you, Zena, for making it so I actually saw it, and with a perspective that literally just changed. It did. It changed my life to see this beautiful water, to like sunlight glinting on it, a 300-foot expanse. There was greenery. It was that like undeveloped park across the river from us that just looked magical. And I thought, oh my God, everybody should experience this. And yeah, that's what we
I
worked
love
on.
that. I love that, venturing out into that world, because it's ours and we
Yeah.
should. and it should be utilized. Um, I loved that segue, and um, the next chapters you open up very beautifully from a pen perspective. I love them. You say here, I have to tell it to the people. What you were saying about loving what you're doing and working. I love this quote where you said, "It hurt my soul to always be fighting against something. I also wanted to build towards something I loved."
Mhm.
And that sat very beautifully with me, because I do think that sometimes we see our injustices so heavily that it clouds, the beauty of what we're fighting for. And you fighting for our natural resource, and the fighting for our actual community, and for the space in what is in our community. This should be ours. It should belong to us. We
Mhm.
should be doing something here. Was beautiful. And you also, I'm trying to find it, but there's this bulleted list that you have. I believe it's in the next lane. Sorry, chapter 12 was beautiful too. I'm going to remind you, because, right. And then you said that your faith, you said, my faith reminds me there is nothing I can do to earn God's love. It is simply there, available to experience. And then later on, you call it your holy hustle. And I thought that was beautiful, a beautiful way of working and being. And for those of us who are trying to understand, like, what should something feel like if one does believe in things of that nature, those were really beautiful ways of saying that, right? We fight for things, and there should be something a bit more divine about it. We're trying to make a living and trying to, like, have nice things, but what does that mean?
Mm.
What does that mean for all of us? What does that mean, just not selfishly?
Yeah.
So that sat very beautifully with me today. So I wanted to remind you of that.
Well, I also think God wants us to be happy
I,
and healthy,
I,
and just, yeah, why not?
I agree.
Period.
I hear that. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, this I thought was great, because this outlined, and I wanted to highlight these points for us, because when we're talking about the things to do and the things to open, I know. And speaking of the things we fight for because they're so painful, a lot of the time when we ask what should we open up, people are like, some let's youth centers, and all of, like, it's all of the nonprofits that do all these things that are like we talked about last session,
Mm-hmm.
dependent on our demise. Sort of, they're dependent on our despair. So
Yeah.
what are these beautiful things that we can do, or what are these things that we could open in our communities that could actually help us? And you mentioned things like, um, instead of like money cash checking stores, we would like banks, legit banks and credit unions that could help us with our finances. More cafes and restaurants and farmers markets, so we have different things to eat. You talk about um, having more ways that encourage a healthy lifestyle, like a path by the park instead
Uh-huh.
of pharmacies. So I thought all of these were very beautiful ways for those who are reading along and figuring out things that we could do.
Yeah.
And since this was written in its time, I wanted to talk to you a bit about that, because we can read that, but what else are you thinking? What else are you working on now? Because what are we working towards to change in our community? You've got this space. You're building these shells of spaces of things that you see that need to be in our community. So how can we further um, along that cause?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I feel like it's all about helping people see that you don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. That's the book. And it's the real concept that we will leave our neighborhoods to experience the things that make us feel whole and that make us feel happy. And those are the things that we should, when we think about it, what the future could be for us, those are the things that we should be like advocating for or building on our own. And sometimes it will involve us building it. And I hear a lot, it's just sort of like, oh, well, you were able to do that, but nobody else can. It's just like that is just the most ridiculous thing. Everybody needs to get caught
Yeah.
trying, thinking about, what are the things that they could do. Because again, I don't think that I'm like any more divinely Yeah, I might be divinely inspired than a bunch of other people. That is true. However, and do I work really hard? 100%.
Yeah.
But none of those things are just completely unique to me. The thing that actually I think I could say makes me a little unique is that I'm like, I want to pour myself into my community because I feel like we have been consistently denied, the power of the kind of talent that I do have. Where there's an expectation that people like me, people like you, people like many folks that we deal with are expected to leave our
Yeah.
communities and take talents and invest them into somebody else's community because somehow or another ours aren't good enough. But to like identify the kind of crazy making
Yeah.
that does to you, where you're like you're led to believe that you're something special,
Yeah.
come from this unspecial place,
Yeah.
and
I
you're take it someplace else. Like, what is that?
yeah.
Who does that serve? Who does it serve?
Yeah. To bring that to whoever is listening to that's so interesting that you say that, because when you talk about coming looking at Bronxlandia and how you came upon it. You talk about it being owned by Amtrak, and you set a calendar reminder for yourself to reach out to them once a month at least to figure out if you could get some traction on it. And then little do you know, they respond next Tuesday and they're like, let's talk about it. And that to me was like no disrespect, but you didn't do anything special. What you did is you reached out, you did something, you did a thing. And I think that sometimes our fear or our self-doubt or self-deprecation is so debilitating that we think that other people must have done something else, and meanwhile we just did nothing,
Right.
because we're so scared.
Yes. And I think folks, when you think about those status communities, that people are counting on us to do exactly that. Exactly that. And and we wonder why the programs don't work. But then what do? Do we go, let's create different programs, or let's do something different? Or do we go, we're going to do the same thing again? Like, that is literally the definition of insanity. Like, doing the same exact thing you've been doing before and expecting different results.
Right.
Like, why would we think that all the billions of philanthropic and even the very typical way that government spends money on poverty alleviation is actually going to help on God's green earth would make us believe that, considering the history and the statistics of how it really doesn't work. But again, we still keep doing it. And then if somebody, sort of like sticks their neck up and goes, we're going to try something different, it's like, you can't do that. That's not how it's done.
Yeah.
Especially, if you're like from a community like this, from a low status neighborhood, and the expectation is that we can't take care of ourselves. There's just such that patriarchal, just white supremacist trope where it's just like, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Who do you think you are?
Yeah. Yeah. You must not be able to. That reminds me of at the end of chapter 12, you talk about like walking, I forget where you're walking, but you run into some people, and you have like a slight back and forth with them where they're talking about you bringing gentrification into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I laughed. I gave myself a chuckle because it was interesting as I'm reading through it, because it's like she does own it and she did do it herself, and you even like you didn't get the help that they think that you've gotten. And and as we talked about in the last episode in our chapters, you're it's unfortunate, it's this weird, for me it feels like that glass ceiling, right? Like they've let you get here. It's like, oh well, you don't need any more help, we're not going to give you any more help, but you've actually not gotten the assistance that you need or deserve or merit, because the odds are always stacked against us, for unfortunately, as
100%. And I sort of expect the, getting that kind of attitude, and from higher status folks who look at someone like me and just like I'm essentially dismissed in a bunch of different ways. I mean, it looks like I've done an enormous amount, but I also just know if I was a white
So much
guy,
further. Oof.
ciao. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, if we can be blunt about it.
Yeah.
But when, yeah, but I think that was the most insane thing, when I relayed this moment where, one of, my fan club, I called my haters the fan club, because I really do believe they
A lot
really
of
are attracted to me.
energy.
Yo, you can't that much energy out unless there's something you want from me, or anybody. But the thing that I couldn't believe was that, not only am I bringing gentrification, that me, I created, reurbanization. I created, the fact that we're not producing as much housing of any level, within the community that to meet the demand. Like, that's me. I did that. But the fact that, the things that I did do, like, I wasn't even given credit for
Yeah.
doing it. Like, you're bringing these white developers in, and I was just like, excuse me, like, please, like, this person was just, it was just the most ridiculous thing. But that's the kind of feeling that often happens because, there's just there's such low expectations of us. We place those low expectations on each other in
Yes.
communities. And if you don't fit the mold of, the person, who actually is deserving of support, then you're somehow not really relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that is unfortunate in the case of, you know, I always tell people you can get much more assistance if you make nothing. If you
Yes.
make nothing, the doors
Oh,
are open,
mhm.
man. Like, but don't you dare make a decent dollar, cause
Oh no.
you know.
Philanthropy. I mean, just think about it. When with the way that philanthropy works, like, it supports more. It's like, if you're doing really badly,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they want to help.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind, and more, as Mauricio Miller, who wrote a book called The Alternative, which is essentially a different way of thinking, like rethinking philanthropy, and not looking at people as the ones, because people need help a lot, and especially considering we've weaponized poverty, in
Mm-hmm.
communities in this country in particular, created wealth inequality, created systemic bias, created systemic racism, did all that stuff. And then we're like, oh, we don't know what we're doing. And, like, of course we need to help people, but we're not really going to help them,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just the kind of, like, the kind of psychotic thinking around who deserves help. And it's always in this super crazy way
Mm-hmm.
that there's no expectation that these communities are going to get better. And
Yeah.
so, like, we help you manage, this miserable state that you're in, that we put you in, mind you. But we're going to help you manage it so that it's like you feel a little bit better, but not that good, because you can't really feel that good
Right.
about human.
Right. And I suppose that's the equity conversation. When there are people so far below, they do need help. But there are some people who, they're the everyday working people who
Mhm.
need affordable income, or would like to get something healthy to eat. You know what I mean? Who would like to have a healthier diet? Who want to
Yeah,
live a little longer? You know what I mean? Like, just being able to have options as general human beings.
right. But
Yeah.
but low status communities are not those places where those things should happen.
Yeah.
If we're only creating, opportunities for those same communities to just be managed, not to thrive, then why would you, actually go out of your way to create much more of a stable, community for people to be a part of, to expect that they're going to grow, and, both economically and socially and emotionally, so that they can be more of a thriving, sort of population. When it's just easier to kind of, like, give people just enough, and not, sometimes not enough, so that they can actually, like, go through that, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs to get point where it's like they are actual self-actualized human beings.
Yeah. Mandra, I would like to thank you for being a developer. Although they were saying like, you have a white developer come in and your retort in your head was like, why can't I am the developer? Why can't I be the
Oh
developer?
my, out loud.
And okay,
That's fine.
okay. Well, I like that. Thank you for clarifying that you are the developer. And as I was having conversation and thoughts about this, it is very interesting what you've done as we now are introducing Bronxlandia. For those who don't know, the two spaces that I'm most familiar with, what I've seen in Boogie Down as a cafe, and my understanding is you opened that up because you looked at these spaces. You were like, this is a dope space, like something should be here, and like I think a coffee spot should be here. And while we wait for someone else to make the move, you had the courage and the drive to make that happen yourself. You've also opened up opportunities for others in that location to have businesses of their own. And then also in Bronxlandia, thinking of how you write that out when you were pitching or explaining, thinking of how to explain to Amtrak what you were going to do with it. You had hard nose. You were like, I'm not going to put it cash in space here. Like I'm not going to put something here that is going to further debilitate my community. And I thought that was marvelous. And perhaps as I think about this, perhaps what we don't have enough of is you. So I'd like to thank you for being, because that's just very tactile. That's a fact to me. You have brought us spaces, and you've opened this up. Art Cube was on yesterday was amazing.
Yeah, really.
So that was cool for anybody who missed it. Art Cube was there to have a networking event. They do production and a bunch of artists in that realm of the world. So please follow Boogie Down Grind for more events that will happen there. And also follow Bronxlandia as it gets warmer and we figure out other events that we're doing there, because I'm looking forward to that. Um, and obviously on Wednesdays we have the open mic.
Mm-hmm.
So come on by with that. Majora, is there anything else going on that we should know about?
Just say it's like, I might have built stuff, but all of the things that we talked about that I actually did, put my money behind and do all the stuff after tax dollars, raising money, doing other stuff. But it really did come from listening to my community to talk about it and about the kind of things, again, that we understood they were leaving the community in order to experience. These were things that it wasn't just me. Yeah, I wanted a good cup of coffee. Yeah, I'd love a place to like see great music in my own neighborhood. But the bottom line is, I was not the only one. Like, we did hundreds and hundreds of surveys, focus groups. We're out in these streets talking to people. So, unlike a lot of other, organizations that I will, remain nameless, who like to say they do, but kind of just, live in an echo chamber talking to themselves. And I feel like that was the difference that we did. Yeah, just because it was not just me.
I appreciate you saying that, Majora, and actually I'll say that too. As I read through it, I was highlighting a bunch of people, and I thought to myself, I was like, you're working with so many other organizations, and they're littered throughout this book, and I thought that it was incredibly humble of you and gracious that you called them out. Like it was the Hunts Point Awareness Committee, the Organization for Waterfront Neighborhoods. There's just the Bronx Forever Working Group that you work with. So it's groups of people that organized and collaborated with you, I'm sure. Yeah.
I couldn't name all of them because some of them, like the feedback that we were getting, that we would literally take in, because I feel like that's what made all of our projects better. Just like paying attention, to just regular people. And that was one of the interesting things that I felt like we got from that process, which was, folks feeling like, I didn't really think these kind of things would actually materialize, because we can talk about them all we want, but nobody's really saying, let's build something that we like.
Yeah.
And you did.
Yeah. Oh, we've got to put we've got to put some action behind ourselves and mobilize. I think you and the groups that you've worked with
Mhm.
have set some great footsteps. And I also think for anybody who hasn't picked up the book, it is incredibly inspiring to just understand and see that what's been done. But also for me, it's helpful to understand the time that it takes. You know, none of this happens overnight, and it feels like it's a lot of work,
Mm.
and it's a lot of long hours, and it's a lot of mixed emotions and stress and all of those things. I mean, it's just real, you know, and I think that that's why these have been helpful for me and for anybody who's rewatching them, and for a lot of people who I know. I think for the newer entrepreneurs that I'm friends with, you know, they feel like they're alone in this, and you know,
Yeah.
they go through these ups and downs. But I'm like, hey, like that's what I think it's made of. You know, it's made of getting
Yeah.
through these highs and lows, and you know, figuring out your sweet spots and understanding that there's different battles fought, in whatever your holy hustle
I
is.
love- Very true.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
So I,
thank you, Danella.
absolutely, I really appreciate your time. And if anything, I hope that tonight reminded you that we are incredibly grateful for you. I continue to be. And I'm looking forward to more of these. I was getting sad as we get closer.
I
I was
know,
like, that means it's almost
no,
over.
not, not, but
But these have been good, and we'll keep trekking on. I think they've been enjoying them. Thank you everybody for sitting in and chatting with us. So
thanks. All right, take good care. Mwah.
have a
Bye.
great night.
Thanks. Ciao.
Ciao.